If you've ever read from the prophet Malachi in the Old Testament and then flipped to the Gospel of Matthew, you might have heard there's a 400-year gap of total silence from God. That's the widespread idea that after Malachi's last words, God went completely quiet. No prophets, no messages, nothing for 4 centuries. We even have a name for it, the Intertestamental Period, the time between the testaments. And if we believe the myth, it feels like God just left the building. But what if that entire idea is wrong? What if God wasn't absent, but was actively setting the stage? Getting this right changes everything. It shows us a God who is always faithful, always working, even when he seems quiet. And it reveals the Bible not as 2 separate stories, but one seamless, incredible narrative. So let's bust this myth wide open. I promise you, the evidence that God was at work during those so-called silent years is everywhere. So where do we start looking for God's fingerprints? Right here. The very fact that you can hold a complete Old Testament is our first clue. During those 400 years, Jewish scribes and scholars were divinely guided to compile, copy, and preserve the Hebrew scriptures with incredible care. This wasn't just human effort. It was God ensuring his word was perfectly prepared and waiting for the Messiah it promised. Then, around 250 BC, something huge happened. The Septuagint. This was the entire Old Testament translated into Greek, the common language of the ancient world. Think about that. God orchestrated the spread of his word in a universal language decades before the gospel needed to travel. That's not an accident. That's a setup. And when a Greek king tried to force the Jewish people to abandon their faith, God raised up the Maccabees. Their revolt wasn't just political. It was a divine act to preserve a people, a culture, and a lineage, the very line the Messiah would come from. By the time Jesus was born, the stage was set. A preserved scripture, a common language, Roman roads for travel, and a people longing for their promised deliverer. Silence. No, this was God working backstage with perfect precision. So, if God wasn't absent, what was he doing? He was orchestrating. Every empire that rose, every translation made, every road built, it was all a divine setup. This reframes everything. It means history isn't a series of random events God just watches. It's a story he is actively writing, even in the chapters where he seems quietest. And that truth changes how we see our own lives. Maybe you're in a season right now that feels like silence. No clear direction, no booming voice from heaven. It's easy to believe God has stepped away. But the intertestamental period shouts a different truth. He is the God of purposeful preparation. Your season of waiting isn't a sign of his neglect. It's the evidence of his care, setting the stage for what he will do next. The silence broke with an angel speaking to Zechariah, announcing John the Baptist. That moment wasn't a restart. It was the next line in a story God had been writing all along. And your story is no different.